Aisha Khan thought she had married the man of her dreams, Captain Omar Al Mansoor, a charming Dubai pilot who promised her the world, but within months, the fairy tale turned into horror when she uncovered the secret family he'd hidden, and her discovery cost her life. Aisha Khan had always dreamed of flying high, not just in her career, but in life. Growing up in Mumbai, she worked tirelessly to become a flight attendant, fascinated by the idea of seeing the world from above the clouds. Her job gave her freedom, but also loneliness. Between airports and hotel rooms, she longed for someone who could make her feel grounded. That person seemed to appear out of nowhere one evening on a Dubai Paris flight, Captain Omar Al Mansoor. Omar was everything she had imagined in her dreams: tall, confident, with the quiet authority that came naturally to experienced pilots. He had a charm that disarmed everyone around him. Their first meeting was brief, just professional greetings before the flight took off. But during those long hours in the sky, their eyes met more than once. When they landed in Paris, Omar invited the crew to dinner. Most declined, tired from the flight, but Aisha joined. What began as small talk about travel soon turned into laughter, shared secrets, and stories of their childhoods. In the weeks that followed, their paths kept crossing. They started requesting to be scheduled on the same flights, a secret they both quietly enjoyed. Omar's gestures grew thoughtful: a cup of her favorite coffee before takeoff, small gifts from duty, free stores, and handwritten notes left in her locker. For Aisha, who had spent years in a world of constant motion, he became her sense of stillness. She felt seen, protected, and deeply loved. When Omar confessed that he wanted to marry her, it felt too good to be true. He told her his parents were traditional and wealthy, but that he didn't care about status or expectations. He wanted someone real, someone like her. Aisha's family hesitated at first. They didn't know much about Omar beyond his polished appearance and confident words, but his visits to Mumbai and the respect he showed them soon erased their doubts. Within months, plans for a grand wedding in Dubai were underway. The ceremony was nothing short of magical. Set against the golden backdrop of a luxury resort overlooking the Arabian Gulf, it was a celebration that seemed straight out of a film. Aisha wore an elegant ivory lehenga embroidered with gold thread, and Omar arrived in a cream sherwani that made them look like royalty. Guests flew in from around the world, and cameras captured every smile, every tear, every moment that shimmered with promise. The couple exchanged vows under the soft glow of lanterns, while the sea breeze carried whispers of blessing through the night. After the celebrations, Aisha moved into Omar's villa in Dubai Marina, a sleek, glass-fronted home with a view of the skyline that glittered like a dream. It was her first real home away from India, and she filled it with warmth, candles, plants, and soft music that played in the evenings when she waited for Omar to return from his flights. She learned to cook his favorite meals, left him handwritten notes for when he came home late, and spent her free days exploring Dubai's cafes and beaches, taking pictures to send to her family back home. To the outside world, Aisha and Omar were the perfect couple, two people who had found love while soaring through the skies. Their Instagram posts showed weekend getaways, luxury dinners, and sweet captions that drew envy from colleagues. Aisha's friends often told her how lucky she was to have found someone so loving and successful. She agreed, smiling each time, though deep down she sometimes wondered why Omar avoided talking about his past. There were moments that didn't quite make sense. Aisha once noticed a faint mark on his finger where a ring might have been, and once, during dinner, he flinched when she mentioned wanting to meet his family. He quickly changed the subject and laughed it off, promising to introduce her soon. She brushed it aside, telling herself that every man had his secrets and that love meant patience. At night, as she lay in bed, listening to the distant hum of the city, Aisha often thought about how fast her life had changed from long flights and lonely hotels to a home, a husband, and a future that looked brighter than ever. She didn't know then that behind the man she adored lay another world, one he had hidden carefully, one that would soon pull her into a nightmare she could never escape. The first few weeks of married life were everything Aisha had imagined: candlelit dinners, spontaneous weekend drives, and messages from Omar that made her blush like a newlywed. She loved the way he called her his lucky charm, and how he would surprise her with flowers after every flight. They seemed like a perfect match, both travelers, both living life above the clouds. Every morning, Aisha watched from the balcony as Omar left for work in his crisp pilot uniform, confident and composed. She often told herself that marrying him had been the best decision of her life, but perfection doesn't last forever. Slowly, small cracks began to show. Omar's schedule, once predictable, started changing without explanation. He would claim sudden emergency flights or unexpected overnight stays. Yet the airline's internal system, which Aisha could easily check, didn't list any such flights. When she asked, he smiled, saying he was helping a friend cover extra hours. Aisha didn't want to seem suspicious so early in their marriage, so she chose to believe him. But doubt began to grow quietly in the corners of her mind. At first, it was little things. Aisha found unfamiliar perfume on one of Omar's shirts, one she didn't use. There were moments when he left his phone face down during dinner, or muted it when it buzzed. Once, she picked up his phone to check the time, but it demanded a fingerprint lock, something he had never used before. When she asked him about it jokingly, he said it was just for privacy, because pilots received a lot of work-related calls. She smiled, but the uneasiness lingered. Her work as a flight attendant kept her busy, yet she noticed a shift in her own routine. Her thoughts were no longer on destinations or passengers, but on Omar's increasingly secretive behavior. She found herself scanning through his social media for clues and rereading his messages late at night. She wanted reassurance that nothing was wrong. One evening, while Omar was supposedly on a long-haul flight to Singapore, Aisha received a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. The message contained a photo of Omar sitting at a dinner table with a woman and 2 children. The caption said, "Still think he belongs to you." Her heart began to race as she stared at the screen, unsure whether it was some cruel prank or a mistake. The photo was recent, she could tell by the clothes he was wearing, the same ones she had ironed 2 days earlier. She didn't sleep that night. Her mind raced with possibilities, explanations, lies she had ignored. The next morning, she called the airline's scheduling department, pretending she needed to confirm Omar's roster for a personal surprise. The employee casually mentioned that Captain Omar had taken personal leave for the week. That confirmed everything. He wasn't on a flight to Singapore. He was somewhere in Dubai with someone else. Over the next few days, Aisha's world began to crumble. She quietly began searching for information, reaching out to mutual colleagues for clues. One of them, a senior flight attendant who had worked with Omar for years, hesitated before telling her the truth. Omar had been married before, the colleague said softly, and his wife still lived in Dubai. The 2 children in the photo were his. The news hit Aisha like a blow to the chest. Omar had never mentioned a divorce. There was no evidence that his first marriage had ended. Her mind flashed back to every detail that had once seemed innocent: the phone calls he took outside, the trips that didn't match his schedule, the hidden ring mark on his finger. All the signs had been there. She had just refused to see them. Aisha felt betrayed, humiliated, and trapped. She couldn't understand how the man who had promised her forever could live a double life so effortlessly. Every memory of their wedding, every kiss, every whispered word now felt poisoned. She considered confronting him immediately, but fear held her back. Omar's calm nature now seemed dangerous. If he could lie so perfectly, what else was he capable of hiding? Instead, Aisha decided to gather proof before she made her move. She saved the photo, took screenshots of the messages, and started documenting everything strange. She knew that exposing a man like Omar, respected, wealthy, and connected, wouldn't be easy, but she was determined. Still, deep down, she wished it were all a misunderstanding, that somehow there was another explanation. She waited for him to return from his so-called trip, pretending everything was normal. She cooked his favorite meal, arranged candles on the table, and forced a smile when he walked through the door. But as she looked into his eyes that evening, she could tell. He was lying again effortlessly, confidently, like a man who believed his secrets were safe. What Aisha didn't know was that her discovery had already set off a dangerous chain of events, and the man she thought she could expose was preparing to silence her forever. The tension in the house grew thicker with each passing day. Aisha could no longer look at Omar without feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Every time he smiled, she saw deceit behind it. Every time he spoke sweetly, she heard lies hidden in his tone. She had once loved his confidence, but now it frightened her. He was too calm, too composed, as if nothing in the world could shake him. And maybe that was what made him so dangerous. Aisha spent days debating what to do. Part of her wanted to confront him and demand the truth, while another part urged her to stay silent until she knew how to protect herself. She was living with a stranger who shared her bed, but carried secrets powerful enough to destroy her. The walls of the villa, once symbols of love, now felt like a cage. She slept restlessly, jumped at every noise, and began locking the bedroom door at night when Omar was away. One afternoon, unable to bear the weight of silence any longer, she decided to confront him. Omar returned from work looking tired but strangely cheerful, carrying a bouquet of white roses. Aisha's heart raced as she handed him her phone, the photo of him with the other woman and children glowing on the screen. For a long moment he said nothing. He simply looked at the image, then looked at her. There was no denial, no anger, no guilt in his expression, only coldness. He finally admitted that the woman in the picture was his wife, and the children were his. He claimed that things had been complicated, that the marriage was emotionally over, but the law and family ties made divorce difficult. He told Aisha he had planned to tell her eventually, that he loved her and would fix everything soon. But to Aisha, every word sounded like another layer of deceit. She realized that the man she had married had built his love on lies from the very beginning. After that day, nothing felt the same. She avoided him whenever possible, pretending to be busy with her flights or errands. When she did speak to him, it was brief and distant, but Omar seemed to sense her withdrawal. He started asking where she went, who she talked to, even checking her phone once when she left it unattended. His possessiveness grew, masked behind forced affection. He would cook for her, buy her gifts, and plan romantic evenings, but there was a sharpness behind his gestures, as though he was testing her loyalty. Aisha confided in her best friend Zara, who lived in Mumbai. Over a late night call, her voice shaking, she revealed everything: the lies, the photo, the confrontation. Zara begged her to leave immediately, to report him to the authorities or the airline's management. But Aisha hesitated. She feared the scandal, the judgment, and the chaos that would follow. More than that, she feared Omar's reaction. He had power, money, and connections. If she tried to expose him, she wasn't sure what he would do. Still, she decided she couldn't live in silence any longer. Aisha began collecting evidence: emails, flight records, messages, and photos, planning to take them to the airline's HR department. She also started drafting a message to Omar's first wife, intending to tell her everything. It was her way of reclaiming power, of finally confronting the man who had stolen her peace. But Omar must have sensed her plan. Over the next few days, his demeanor changed. He grew restless, paranoid, and distant. He questioned her travel plans and began coming home earlier than usual, as if keeping an eye on her. Once, she found him going through her purse, and when she confronted him, he smiled faintly and said he was just looking for her keys. The tension was unbearable, the air inside the house thick with unspoken fear. Aisha decided she would leave him. She planned to move out quietly, stay with a colleague for a few days, and then report everything to the authorities. She packed a small suitcase and hid it behind the closet, intending to leave after her next flight. But fate had other plans. That evening, Omar suggested they have dinner together. He said he wanted to talk calmly, to make things right. His voice was soft, his face expressionless, and for a moment Aisha wanted to believe him. She told Zara about the dinner, promising to message afterward. It would be the last message she ever sent. As the sun set over Dubai, the city lights shimmered across the water outside their villa. Inside, the candles flickered, the table was set, and soft music filled the air. To anyone passing by, it looked like a perfect evening between two lovers. But behind those closed doors, something irreversible was about to happen, a moment that would turn Aisha's quiet determination into a deadly confrontation she would never survive. The night of the dinner began with a deceptive calm. The villa was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the slow rhythm of soft jazz playing in the background. Aisha had spent most of the afternoon in silence, her heart pounding with unease. The house felt different that day, colder, emptier, and heavy with something she couldn't name. Omar had promised that they would talk things through, that he wanted to start over, to rebuild what they had lost. She wanted to believe him, but every instinct inside her screamed that something was wrong. She wore a simple blue dress, one he had once said was his favorite. It was her last attempt to keep things peaceful. She didn't want a fight, she just wanted closure. As she arranged the dinner table, she noticed how carefully everything had been planned, the candles already lit, the wine already poured, the lights dimmed just enough to cast shadows across the room. It was all too perfect, almost staged. When Omar arrived, he greeted her with a faint smile and a gift bag. Inside was a diamond bracelet, elegant and cold. He slipped it onto her wrist and said it was a new beginning. Aisha thanked him, though her hands trembled. She tried to keep her voice steady, but her mind was racing. She had already decided that after this dinner she would leave. Her suitcase was hidden under the bed, and her documents were packed. She planned to take a taxi after he fell asleep and never look back. They sat across from each other, the clinking of silverware filling the silence. Omar spoke about trivial things, flights, colleagues, upcoming trips, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Aisha watched him closely, noticing the stiffness in his jaw, the way his eyes darted to her phone on the table. He was pretending, just as he always did, and that realization made her sick to her stomach. Halfway through the meal, Aisha decided to tell him. She said she couldn't live with lies anymore and that she wanted to end things quietly. Her voice was calm, her words careful, but the effect was immediate. Omar's smile faded, his posture straightened, and his tone turned cold. He asked her what she meant, and when she repeated herself, something in his expression changed completely. It was as if the man she knew vanished, replaced by someone darker, someone she had never met before. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his wine glass. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood, seeping into the fabric as silence filled the room. Aisha froze. He began pacing, muttering under his breath, his voice low and sharp. She tried to stand, but he blocked her path. The calm conversation turned into accusations, his voice rising, his face hardening. He accused her of betrayal, of ruining his life, of threatening his reputation. The argument escalated quickly. Aisha tried to back away, but Omar grabbed her arm. She struggled, shouting for him to stop, but he was stronger. In the chaos, he struck her once, then again, and she fell against the edge of the table. The sound of glass shattering filled the room. For a brief moment, everything went silent. Then, in a blind rage, he grabbed the nearest object, a wine bottle, and swung it. The blow landed on her head with a sickening thud. Aisha collapsed to the floor, motionless. Omar stood frozen, staring at what he had done. The candle flames flickered, casting shadows over the blood-stained floor. Panic began to replace his rage. He tried shaking her, calling her name, but there was no response. Realizing she was gone, he staggered back, breathing heavily. His perfect life, the lies he had built so carefully, had crumbled in an instant. Hours passed before he moved. When he finally did, it was with cold precision. He wrapped her body in a white sheet, wiped the blood from the tiles, and poured bleach everywhere. He cleaned until the smell was overwhelming. He turned off the security cameras, deleted footage, and loaded her body into the trunk of his car. Before dawn, he drove out of the city, past the shimmering lights of Dubai, into the empty desert. The roads were silent, the world asleep. Somewhere near Al-Qudra, he stopped, dug a shallow pit with his bare hands, and buried her beneath the sand. When the first rays of sunlight touched the dunes, he stood there, staring at the mound of earth that covered the woman who had once trusted him completely. He returned home before sunrise, showered, changed into his uniform, and went to work as if nothing had happened. That morning, Aisha's phone kept ringing from her airline, her friends, her family, but there was no answer. No one knew that while the city woke to another bright dew. By morning, Aisha Khan was gone, buried in silence, erased by the man she thought she loved. For 2 days, no one could reach Aisha. Her colleagues assumed she was resting after a long flight, but concern grew when she missed her scheduled departure. Aisha had never been late, never missed a call from the airline. When the cabin crew supervisor called her repeatedly with no response, the airline reported her missing to the Dubai police. Her best friend, Zara, who had been waiting for Aisha's message after the dinner, was the first to raise alarm publicly. She called the police, sent emails to the Indian consulate, and began posting on social media, begging for help to find her friend. Police arrived at the couple's villa in Dubai Marina. The house was spotless, unnaturally clean, almost sterile. The scent of bleach hung heavy in the air. There were faint smudges on the floor, as though something had been scrubbed repeatedly. Investigators found Aisha's phone switched off, her suitcase missing, and her passport still inside a drawer. Omar opened the door calmly, dressed neatly as if nothing had happened. He told officers that Aisha had left after an argument, saying she needed space. He claimed she had taken a taxi and hadn't returned since. His tone was even, his answers quick, and at first he sounded convincing, but the police noticed inconsistencies in his story. When asked about the last time he saw her, his timeline didn't match the security footage from nearby buildings. Cameras showed Aisha entering the villa the night before, but never leaving. The building's gate logs showed no taxi arriving, no visitor entering, and no sign of her departure. The surveillance system inside the villa, which usually recorded every corner, had been mysteriously disconnected that same evening. The investigators became suspicious. They began questioning Omar's colleagues and neighbors. A neighbor mentioned hearing loud noises, a thud, and what sounded like a woman's cry around midnight. Another said Omar's car was seen leaving the villa in the early hours, though his flight wasn't scheduled until later that morning. When asked where he went that night, Omar said he had driven out for fresh air. His answers grew shakier, his calm demeanor slipping. On the third day, Aisha's car was found parked near a cafe she used to visit. Her purse was inside, but the keys and wallet were missing. That discovery led police to treat the case as a potential homicide. They brought Omar in for questioning again, this time with forensic evidence from the villa, traces of blood found beneath the clean tiles, confirmed later through DNA testing to be Aisha's. Under pressure, Omar maintained his innocence. He insisted Aisha had hurt herself and left in anger, but the evidence began closing in. His phone's GPS records showed he had driven into the desert the night she disappeared. Police searched the area he had visited, and on the 5th day, in a quiet stretch of Al Qudra Desert, they found a shallow grave. Inside it was Aisha's body, wrapped in a white sheet. The autopsy revealed she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. There were defensive wounds on her arms, showing she had tried to fight back. The news spread quickly, reaching India within hours. Social media exploded with grief and outrage. Aisha's photo, once filled with smiles from her flights and travels, now appeared on every headline: a flight attendant murdered by pilot husband in Dubai. Omar was arrested at his workplace, still wearing his pilot uniform. During interrogation, the mask he had worn for so long finally broke. He confessed that Aisha had discovered his secret family and threatened to expose him to both the airline and his wife. He claimed he never meant to kill her, that he had just lost control during their argument. But investigators knew the level of planning. The camera disconnection, the cleaning, the burial showed cold calculation, not panic. The court proceedings that followed were tense and heavily covered by international media. Aisha's family flew in from Mumbai, sitting quietly in the courtroom as Omar was sentenced to life in prison. He showed no emotion, staring blankly ahead as the judge read his verdict. In the aftermath, Aisha's colleagues and friends created a foundation in her name to support women trapped in deceitful or abusive relationships abroad. Her story became a warning, a reminder of how love can blind even the strongest hearts, and how danger sometimes hides behind the most charming smiles. In her family's home in Mumbai, her parents kept her wedding photo framed on a shelf. The picture showed Aisha in her ivory lehenga, radiant, full of dreams, She had looked so alive, so certain that her future was secure. No one could have imagined that the man standing beside her that day, the one holding her hand, would be the same person to end her life. Her story, once a tale of love and ambition, became one of betrayal and loss, and in the silence of the desert where she was found, the wind still carried her name, a whisper of a woman who only wanted love, but found tragedy instead.